The United States has just launched new airstrikes against Iran-linked targets in the Gulf of Oman, and the latest focus was direct. Two empty Iranian oil tankers, the empty Sistar 3 and the empty Sevda, were disabled before entering an Iranian port. This Friday, May 8, 2026, U.S. Central Command reported that the ships were attempting to violate the ongoing blockade against vessels entering or leaving Iran. The action was carried out by a U.S. Navy FA-18 Super Hornet launched from the aircraft carrier USS George A.W. Bush, which struck the tanker's smokestacks with precision munitions to prevent them from reaching their destination. I'll tell you all about it in a moment, but right now, you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well-informed. Real-time information with the best journalistic quality you've ever seen. With the standard of credibility, Milson Alves. The main point is that Washington didn't wait for the ships to dock at the port. The order was to prevent the maneuver before the violation was completed. According to CENTCOM, the two oil tankers were empty, but they were still treated as non-compliant vessels within a larger military operation. The stated objective was not to sink the ships, but to disable their ability to operate. The message was harsh. Even if empty, an Iranian oil tanker trying to break the blockade will be stopped before it can reinforce Tehran's logistics. The operation is taking place at a time of high tension, right after Iranian forces launched missiles, drones, and small boats against 3 American destroyers that were crossing the international passage toward the Gulf of Oman. The ships involved were the USS Truxtun, the USS Rafael Peralta, and the USS Mason. CENTCOM stated that no American assets were hit and that the threats were intercepted. Then, the United States responded with self-defense strikes against Iranian military facilities, including sites linked to missile and drone launches, command centers, and surveillance structures. The attack on the Sistar 3 and Sevda oil tankers shows that the White House has decided to turn the blockade into a real measure, not just a diplomatic warning. The blockade targets the entry and exit of vessels linked to Iranian oil, a sector vital to the regime. CENTCOM reported that multiple commercial ships have already been disabled and that more than 50 have been redirected to ensure compliance with the operation. In international news, it is also reported that more than 70 oil tankers are being prevented from entering or leaving Iranian ports. With the capacity to transport more than 166 million barrels of oil, valued at over $13 billion. The case did not start with these two ships. 2 days earlier, on May 6, the United States had already disabled the MT Razna, another empty Iranian oil tanker also in the Gulf of Oman. In that action, an FA-18 Super Hornet launched from the USS Abraham Lincoln hit the vessel's rudder with 20mm cannon fire. With that, the Sistar 3 and the Sevda become the next step in a sequence. First, Washington prevented an oil tanker from continuing its journey. Now, it hit 2 at once, using precision munitions on the smokestacks. The American justification is simple. Iran tried to break the blockade while still maintaining an aggressive stance against ships from the United States and regional partners. Washington's response was to prevent the maritime route from becoming a loophole for Tehran to reorganize its economy, protect its fleet, and test the limits of the American Navy. The Trump administration is trying to formally maintain the ceasefire, but without allowing Iran to use this ceasefire as a shield to advance at sea. The difference is important. The United States did not announce an unlimited naval war. They announced forced compliance with a line that had already been drawn. Marco Rubio stated that Washington is still waiting for an Iranian response, the most recent proposal to open a serious negotiation process, but diplomacy at this moment is moving alongside military pressure. While Tehran considers its response, the blockade continues, ships are being stopped, and the American Navy maintains its presence in the Gulf. Trump's logic is to apply pressure before sitting at the table, not after. Iran wanted to buy time, test the passage, and gauge the American reaction. The response came with an airstrike, an active blockade, and the public exposure of Iran's vulnerability at sea. The situation also weighs on the United Arab Emirates, which has once again activated air defenses against Iranian missile and drone attacks, according to Reuters reports. This broadens the problem beyond just the oil tankers. Iran is not only putting pressure on Washington, it also puts pressure on Gulf nations, which depend on maritime stability, energy, trade, and insurance. The action against the Sea Star 3 and Sevda has an immediate economic effect. Even without cargo, the oil tankers are part of the logistical machinery of Iranian oil. An empty ship that returns to port can be reloaded, redistributed, and put back into a clandestine or semi-clandestine export network. By preventing entry, the United States targets fleet replenishment before it returns to the transport cycle. It's a way to tighten the regime, so that, sem depender apenas de sanções no papel, the naval air arm acts as the direct arm of the blockade, while CENTCOM controls the traffic it considers connected to Tehran's economic effort. The historical fact that helps to understand this decision comes from the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. At that time, the United States established a naval quarantine to prevent the Soviet Union from bringing new military materials to Cuba. Soviet ships approached the blockade line. Some turned back, others were stopped by American naval forces and were only allowed to proceed when they were not carrying offensive weapons. The lesson is straightforward. When Washington understands that a sea route is fueling a strategic threat, the Navy becomes an instrument of pressure before the crisis gets out of control. In the current case, the difference is that the cargo is not nuclear missiles in Cuba, but rather the economic and naval structure that supports Iran. However, the principle is similar. Establish a line, monitor the sea, and force the adversary to choose between backing down or bearing the cost of violation. Other nations have also used control over shipping as a pressure tool against hostile regimes. In 2019, British Royal Marines seized the Iranian oil tanker Grace 1 in Gibraltar on suspicion of carrying oil to Syria in violation of sanctions. The measure angered Tehran, but it showed that a ship, its cargo, and its route can become political targets when a nation decides to take sanctions seriously. The European Union itself, alongside the G7, created mechanisms regarding Russian oil transported by sea to reduce Moscow's revenues and maintain economic pressure without shutting down the entire global energy market. Now, the next step depends on two fronts. In the military field, CENTCOM needs to maintain the blockade without allowing Iranian oil tankers to turn exceptions into the norm. In the diplomatic field, Rubio is waiting for Tehran's response to know whether there will be a serious negotiation or a new round of confrontation. But American pressure has already changed the calculus. Iran tried to move vessels, saw 2 oil tankers being disabled, and still faces the weight of an American fleet ready to act. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check the comments to stay engaged with the Milson Alves community.